to the Work Wonders podcast, brought to you by Asta HR, where we simplify the human side of business. I'm Angela.
And I'm Susan. Let's dive into today's episode and find out what you've been wondering about. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about family and domestic violence leave. And we realise that this can be a sensitive and triggering subject for some people. So please take care of yourself while listening. If you'd like to access support, please remember to contact 1-800-RESPECT, that's 1-800-737-732, or Lifeline Australia 13 11 14. So what is family and domestic violence leave? We're going to cover off on what the changes mean, what you can do now to prepare for it, be prepared for claims for leave, and what to do when you actually get a request. As you can imagine, there's quite a bit for us to cover, so we better get started. This is the Work Wonders podcast. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Susan.
Now, this new legislation was passed late last year, I think. It was, yeah. Right near the end of the year. Caught Fair Work on the hop. So we're still waiting for them to update some of the resources that you would normally expect when something as major as this goes through. So you may have heard about the family and domestic violence leave.
Yeah, so it came into play 1st of February for most businesses. For those that are classed a small business employer, which is anyone with either 1 up to 14 employees. If that's you, you're a small business employer and you've got a bit more time up your sleeve. They don't need to adopt these changes until 1 August, but that doesn't mean you can't. But, yeah, that's the deadline for those type of employers.
So when we're saying employers, we actually mean all employers in Australia eventually, because it covers all employees in Australia.
It does.
So when we're saying all employees, we're talking about full-time, part-time, casual.
Yes, isn't that interesting? In COVID, during lockdown, there were certain types of leave that casuals were entitled to that was paid. But in New South Wales here, there's things like long service leave, but really this is the only type of paid leave that casuals are entitled to. You know, some sort of regular leave, yeah.
And so we've just said paid leave, but we haven't quantified that. So it's actually 10 days paid leave. 10
days per employee per annum.
Yes. And that's available from the minute someone starts working for you?
Yeah, that's right. So if
you're from those start dates for existing employees?
Yes. Yeah, so if you are someone that has, let's say, 25 staff, 1st of February would have been your date to commence, and so you would have looked at your payroll system on that day, hopefully, or the next day after, and given everybody on that system 10 days entitlement.
Yeah. Now, the thing to remember too is that it doesn't accrue from year to year.
Yeah, it's very different to other types of leave. So watch this space for what payroll providers do, like Zero MyOb, that sort of thing, because their system is based around the accrual type of system in calculating how much leave people are entitled to. But this one is upfront. So you get those 10 days, like we said, from the start. If they get used, that's okay. It just gets replenished back up to 10 days at the anniversary of their start date.
Yes, and that's an important point as well. It's not the anniversary for existing employees. It's not the anniversary of the 1st of Feb or the 1st of August. No. It's the anniversary of their starting date with you.
Yeah. And it doesn't carry over. So it's not like other leave where if you don't use it, like annual leave, for example, if it's not used, it carries over to the next year. It's not like that.
Yeah. And so it's paid at whatever the pay rate would have been that they would have earned had they worked.
Right.
Including for casuals. So can you explain that?
Sure. So full-time's a nice easy example. If you've got someone that works Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, let's say, if they need to take 2 of those days off to, deal with the impact of domestic and family violence, then those 2 days would be paid just like they would have if they were in there, so 9 till 5. In the instance of someone part-time or casual, you would need to assume what they would have been paid if they had arrived. So again, let's say it's a casual and they are rostered on to work for those 2 days and they would have worked 9 till 5 on both those days, but they've called in that they need to take that time off for leave, and so they do so. They still get entitled to that pay, 9 till 5, But if there were ever shift allowances or penalty rates or, casuals are quite complex, so all those different things that they can accrue, if they would have got that during that shift, then they are still entitled to that during the leave.
So if you're an employer, you're probably thinking, oh my goodness.
That's a bit complex.
It is complex, and there's also, the sense that, well, you have to pay for this as an employer. This isn't something that the government's going to give you money for.
Unfortunately not, no.
But I thought it would be worthwhile, before we move on to what you can do now to prepare for these instances, to really look at why the government's brought this in.
Yeah, great idea.
So unfortunately, domestic and family violence in Australia is at pretty dire proportions, epidemic proportions.
Oh, yes.
So figures from Bureau of Statistics tell us that on average 1 woman a week is killed by an intimate partner. 10 women a day are hospitalised. 1 in 10 women who are hospitalised are pregnant.
Yeah, it's horrible.
And on average, police are called out once. Police in Australia, this is their workload, once every 2 minutes called out
alarming,
to a family violence episode. And it's not just women who are affected. So 1 in 6 women might be affected and 1 in 16 men.
Yeah.
But the majority from those figures obviously are women and the majority of perpetrators are men. So just keep that in mind in terms of this is a social issue. It's not an individual issue. It's something we as a society need to work together to help solve.
I agree with you, Susan. I think people spend so much of their time at work. It's, it would be foolish to think that their personal life doesn't get brought into that scenario in some way. And so I think it's employers are part of the solution to this problem.
And work can also, provide a haven, if you like, for someone who's
stability.
in that situation. And you, as an employer, don't want to do anything to exacerbate a situation. The person's already feeling bad enough if they're lucky enough to have a job. And I think the statistics I was reading somewhere show that the vast majority of people who are subject to this sort of violence are also employed. So, they're in our workplaces, and ideally we'd like to keep them in the workplaces and look after them and keep them as productive employees.
And keep them safe. You don't want that, that risk if they're feeling exposed to those environments at home. Potentially you don't want that to come to the workplace as well. No,
exactly. So that's probably a good segue now to what we need to do as employers to implement this whole new regime of leave and the associated supports we need to put in place.
Well, as we said, I think for most businesses that it started for on the 1st of Feb. Hopefully you've already gone through and made sure everyone has been told about the change and that everyone's got that 10-day entitlement. So if you haven't done that, that's the place to begin. Have a chat with them about that. Yeah.
Ideally, have a policy around it so that people know what you're talking about for a start. Yeah. It's good to have some definitions in there, but also what's going to happen. And we talked also earlier, Angela, about culture.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it goes much more than, whilst a policy is very important, I think it goes much more wider than that. And so to be about, like you say, introducing the topic to people and talking about it within your team and what support is available to them even outside your organisation in the local community. Maybe thinking about things that you can be part of in the community. There's International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women that happens every year. So, and all different communities do different things that you can be part of. So whether it's supporting that in whatever way you can or encouraging your staff to go out and be part of events and things like that, or just simply talking about it.
Yeah, so that it doesn't become such a taboo subject to discuss, I guess.
Very hard for them to talk about it with an employer, I would assume, you know, anybody that might be needing to use this type of leave, that would be pretty hard.
And this is where we get into things like having a culture of psychological safety so that people feel that it's safe to have those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You might even do things like put posters up in your website. Posters up in your workplace.
Yeah.
You can put on your website if you want.
Sure.
You know, just like you might for physical safety in the workplace, work health and safety hazards, you know, but things, you know, making it part of what you talk about as a team and what's important to you and keeping everybody safe.
So it's going to be an awkward conversation a lot of the time.
Not easy. No, not easy. And probably something fair to say majority of employers or managers out there would not be well equipped to do. You know, it's not something natural that would come to them, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, Business New South Wales did a survey of the sort of things that I guess related workplace behaviours. Yeah. So it sounds cold to bring it back to productivity, but this is going to affect someone's productivity and what they're doing in terms of your business. So there's sort of things that were observable were absenteeism, distraction, people feeling sort of changing in terms of being more withdrawn and not willing to interact with others. They might be inconsistent in their work performance or maybe having more injuries at work because they're thinking about other things.
Or wanting to hide an injury that's happened at home.
Oh dear. Yeah.
These are the sort of things that might present at a workplace that you might be thinking, hang on a minute, are they okay?
Another thing that I was thinking about too is the partner or whoever the perpetrator might be trying to control the person while they're at work.
Absolutely.
You know, phoning, texting, even turning up at the workplace.
Yes.
So it's important for you to be alert to those things happening, but also to know what you'll do to respond when those do happen. So we're sort of talking about two things here because we're talking about the leave itself, and we'll get on to in a minute what to do with those requests, but it's also around, you know, the behaviours that are going to happen and how you're going to handle that, how you can start a conversation.
Yeah.
That could be a whole separate episode on its own, couldn't it?
It could be. It's much more than just paying for a day off, isn't it? Yeah. And going back to what we said in the beginning, if you've got that culture of talking about it, being open about it, knowing what supports are available, they know what your policy is if they ever need to use it, it kind of opens the door, doesn't it? It starts the conversation somewhat. You know, I'm here if you want to talk about it. It's a safe place. You know what I'm going to do. You know, it's a good foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Are you feeling overwhelmed by all the things that you need to do to manage people in your business? We've got changes to legislation, different generations in the workplace, managing the expectations of the people that you employ. Why not hand all that over to the experts and get on with what you do best? The experienced team at Astor HR can quickly give you the advice that you need and get you headed in the right direction. With our HR support and coaching for you with managing people, it all becomes so much simpler. Schedule your free call today at astorhr.com.au. Now let's get back to the episode. So now let's look at what it means, you know, what are the practicalities of when you get a request for that leave. What sort of evidence can you ask for? How do you handle the request? What does that mean from the perspective of payroll?
Well, first things first, I don't know that these systems are going to have the functionality to keep some sort of track of eligibility, or not eligibility, of the entitlement that a person's got. So there's 10 days. You might need to have a manual process.
Okay, yeah.
Is what I'm getting at. So that might be something to establish. But once you actually go to do it, it would be processing it just like any other leave in your payroll system and paying for it. The biggest difference is do not put it on the payslip as family and domestic violence leave or violence leave or DF leave or any of that. Just put other leave or something else, paid leave, something very nondescript, because sometimes the perpetrator might have access to that and it wouldn't, it wouldn't be something that you want. And obviously there's confidentiality around that as well. If someone's going to share with you that that's what they need to do, it's not about sharing that information in any way. So that's first thing. So we're given those scenarios earlier about how to actually sort of pay it in those different ways, whether they're full-time or casual, part-time. So it's about making sure they're paid what they would have if they were at work.
Can you talk a bit about the entitlement itself, like what it's to be used for? Because that's quite specific, isn't it? So it's not just taking time off because you need a break.
No. Look, the law is very intentional. In fact, it gives a clear definition. It's intended for doing something to deal with the impact of domestic and family violence, and that it would be impractical for the person to do that outside their regular work hours. Yep. So what might that be? Well, they might need to go to Centrelink and, apply for some sort of something. They might need to go to births, deaths and marriages. They might need to just be at home whilst a locksmith comes over and changes the locks. There's lots of practical things that might need to happen in that time. So you talked about evidence before, and you absolutely do have the right to ask for evidence. That is built into the legislation. But I would caution you just to think about whether that's worthwhile, if that's something that would sort of damage the relationship with your employee, if you're pressing for that sort of information. I think the only time that you would ask for that is if you were feeling very uncertain that a person was being genuine.
Yes, exactly.
So there's a lot to unpack there, Susan, probably more than we can fit in a small podcast episode.
Yes.
But lucky for you listeners, we do have a webinar that we ran late last year. We also had a social worker involved in that, someone who is very experienced in the field of supporting people in domestic and family violence services, and also an employer who has been offering this as an entitlement to their employees for some time. So they both joined me on the webinar, and happy to put the link to that in the show notes. Please go and have a look at that if you'd like more information. They give really great tips and advice from their perspectives of how to deal with this sensitively.
Yeah, excellent. And we'll be adding other resources as they come to hand as well.
Yeah.
So that you'll be able to find those all in our show notes. And of course, you can contact us at any time if you need any help with implementing any of this.
Absolutely.
We hope you got some helpful information from today's episode. We know it's a very difficult and sensitive topic, but hopefully you'll now have more of an idea of what the changes mean for your workplace, what you're going to do about it, what you can do now to be proactive, and also how you're going to respond when you get a request. So what is the one thing you can do today to get started on that?
Thanks for listening to the Work Wonders podcast, brought to you by Asta HR. Hit the subscribe button now to never miss an episode. And if you'd like to continue the conversation with us, you can find us over at astahr.com.au. See you in the next episode.